open letter to teachers and the Education Bureau. Segregation, a noun. The action or state of setting someone apart or something apart from others. Also synonymous to exclusion, isolation, and separation. For a majority of us, the ethnic minority students, this is known to be the cancer of Hong Kong's education system. We are brutally forced to accept the fact that we are different from the rest of the locals. Due to a lack of support from you, the Education Bureau, the standard of segregated schools are not up to par as compared to the other local schools. Teachers are not properly trained to deal with the students, and not enough resources are allocated to these schools. Eventually, the education of the ethnic minority is compromised. We have to face a plethora of problems, from limited choices in education to the lack of exposure to the rest of Hong Kong, both leading to the impossibility of joining the mainstream local, social, and work life. Why does it have to be so unfair? Why do we have to be divided from everybody else just because we are of another race? This is a request to all the teachers and the Education Bureau. Please don't discourage us from studying with those around us. Please empower us and equip us with the skills to connect with the local Chinese. Don't put us into de facto schools depriving us from getting better education. Help ethnic minorities enter the mainstream system so that they're not immediately preconceived to be uneducated. My name is Mohammad Shaikh. I recently turned 19 and I'm studying in the City University of Hong Kong, studying computer science. I was in an all-medium Chinese school, so it was quite hard in the beginning, in kindergarten, and then I moved to Delia English Primary School, and that was quite fun. I did feel like that's where I belonged, but it was just that part of during school hours that I would feel like I was somewhere I was accepted. But when I would come out, I wouldn't be able to communicate with the local Chinese students or people around me, so that was a little sad for someone that young. Kindergarten was tough because I didn't have any friends at that time because everyone was Chinese. I didn't learn Chinese. So there was a really huge cultural gap, and obviously for a 3-year-old, for a 4-year-old, it's really hard to overcome that. So, as I said, primary school was way more welcoming because they were all ethnic minority students, and a minority were the Chinese students. But as I got older, I understood that it's not that we are unwelcomed, it's just that if you don't show the initiative to communicate with them, they will also not do the same. Some people don't get the opportunity. Their parents are not as educated, their parents don't have that much money, so they really can't escape the vicious cycle of segregation. So for me, I got the chance to mingle with the rest of Hong Kong. I have that confidence that I can go up to anybody and talk to them, but they don't, because there's a stigma that they're not welcomed or Chinese people will judge them or something like that. The biggest problem for ethnic minorities is that the schools that they're being taught in, the education level is not as high as compared to the rest of the local schools. So segregation really needs to stop because it's just excluding this minority from the rest of the world, and I think that's really unfair. So the first thing the education system needs to change is segregation and stop de facto schools because it's really harming the minorities. The way this gap can be closed is to promote multiculturalism, because there isn't enough that the Hong Kong government is doing to help them cross paths. I think it's just something that needs to be promoted. I think the biggest challenge would be the fact that there is some times where we do have to face racism. When you're on the train, people are calling you names, and that would be something that's a huge problem. People don't want to sit with me, or they just think I'm unclean or, uneducated and just different. But it's not the case, you know. We aren't different. We're humans just like you. We just speak a different language and our skin tone is just different. So that's the biggest problem, that's racism.
I find it extremely uncomfortable to integrate myself among the local Chinese in my universities, colleges, and societies because of the Chinese language barrier. As I'm unable to speak Cantonese fluently, this hinders me from comfortably communicating with others, not only in group projects or in making friends, but also suffering from instances of racial profiling, such as being frequently targeted for the ID checks by the Hong Kong police, even though I'm a law-abiding citizen. I also feel discrimination while applying for jobs. As a non-Chinese citizen, it is difficult to find a job and survive here in Hong Kong. But ever since I was a kid, I've always dreamt of being a police officer to serve and protect my nation and the country. But seeing the requirements to be in the civil service was way out of my league. I sometimes wish that the local Chinese could be more understanding, accepting, and welcoming us into their environment. At least, as a minority, I would feel there's something called harmony between us. But no, day by day, we get judged by them, either by our actions, skin color, race, or just by other minorities' behavior. As a result, a minority like me can never feel comfortable, and this will only further divide you, not allowing integration. My name is Devan, and I just turned 20 last month. My major is in creative media, Associate of Science. My ethnicity is Indian, and I'm born in Hong Kong. Actually, growing up in Hong Kong, it was not a good experience because I've been studying in a non-Chinese school ever since throughout my life, such as kindergarten. Since we don't really have the same perception or the same get along, so it's somehow difficult to integrate, and it has the awkwardness. It's because I don't know how to communicate with them. They have broken English and I haven't broken Chinese, so there's a barrier of communication. Whenever I see a police officer, I get triggered. Even though I want to be like them, serve the nation, protect the country, but whenever I see them, I get triggered. I have a hatred feeling for them because I'm the frequent targeted for stop and check, and I just hate whenever they stop me. It seems like I did a crime or something, but it's just it's a nasty feeling. It's a discrimination. It's because a lot of people pass by me and they don't really stop them. But if they see a non-Chinese, they would stop them as if they're suspected of doing a crime. The biggest challenge is that in the job market, whenever you see we red Chinese, it's a must. Somehow I already feel eliminated, I'm not qualified to apply, even though I have the right qualifications. So I would not call myself Hong Kong is my home. So gradually I feel that Hong Kong is not really welcoming international people. The common stereotypes I have faced is that, apart from stop and check, if I can't communicate in fluent Chinese in the shops, people would be like, oh, they don't know, where's that? So somehow I feel like they're avoiding me, or maybe it's just that they're uncomfortable to communicate with me in English language. In MTR, there was this one old woman who just covered her nose beside me. I usually take showers 2 times in a day, but her action was way too disastrous. We ethnic minorities would love to integrate into their society, but just because of their one narrow-minded perception, it just hinders us. I just want to tell the local Hong Kong girls that don't have a narrow perception, and just because of the one person, it does not define us.
An open letter to the people in Hong Kong who meet me. As an expat in Hong Kong, I feel compelled to embrace the culture, yet why am I constantly being judged for who I am and where I came from? I'm a Filipino American, yet living here, I'm constantly feeling like I need to be one or the other. I get judging looks and even verbal comments. Is she a helper's daughter or a white girl? Being of mixed race and living here consistently pulls at my identity and how I want to be perceived. You hear that my father is white and my mother is a Filipina, and I hear from you that it was a promiscuous lady trying to find a wealthy man. My character is already judged by your assumptions of my family. I walk in the market with my mother, and instantly she is assumed to be my helper. But others like me do not conform to such. The best way to get to know anyone is to just ask, not assume. I am not a helper's daughter. I am not privileged. I am me, and that's all I want to be known for. My name is Abigail Talent. I'm 16, and I've been living in Hong Kong for about 5 years now. I grew up in a really small town in the US, and moving here was an extreme culture shock, just all the lights and the language and the smog and stuff. It was crazy. I immediately thought, oh, I have to speak Chinese. Oh, I don't know anything. Oh, I don't know the culture. What am I gonna do? But after living here for a couple years, I've gotten used to it, and now I love it. No one could tell that I was American. No one could tell I was Filipino. I got a bunch of Chinese. Are you Chinese? Are you Italian or whatever? It was very difficult, and then I had to conform to something. Either I was Filipino or I was American, because with the whites I was too Asian, but with the Asians I was too white. So making friends was easy, but it was hard to relate. I have a Filipino mother and my dad's this tall white guy, so obviously you get stares like, oh, she just met him at a bar, she just met him at as a helper or something, and that's what I get. And I can even hear, my mom can even hear it in the background, them whispering, speaking in Tagalog, that, is that your helper's daughter? I hope to change the way Filipinos are perceived here. I know that it's very easy to just conform to the idea that they are a domestic helper, because I can see why they are a majority of domestic helpers are Filipinos, but that is not what the first thing that should come into your mind when you see someone walking down the street, and you see a Filipino walking down the street. Get to know them, ask them questions, or just don't even assume at all. It's just not fair to them. And just being an expat here and calling this place my home, but other people don't see it that way. They see it as us trying to invade their space, and it's not fair to us. Being Filipino gives me some sort of bond. Obviously being half only sets me apart, but it makes you relatable to other people. My mother actually was a helper here when she was young, but she did not meet my father in Hong Kong as a helper. So it's definitely a relatable thing with other Filipinos and friends.
An open letter to ethnic minority youths. Whether you are Filipino, Indian, Pakistani, Nepali, Thai, Indonesian, or mixed, whether if this is your birthplace or you moved here just last month, whether you speak Cantonese or not, feel free to call Hong Kong your home. I know, I'm sorry, Hong Kong is not a perfect place. You need to work 3 times as hard to find a school, pass an exam, find a job. But trust me, there are warriors fighting for your opportunities. Your teacher may ask you questions about your celebrations during Eid. Some may be shocked that you are an English teacher instead of a Filipino maid. I apologize for the stares you get from the turban over your head. If you are struggling in your Chinese class, if you feel like you just can't be understood, and if you still feel afraid, listen to these bedtime stories. A Filipino maid turned into an award-winning photographer. A Pakistani runner broke through in the Division I Inter-School Athletics Championships. A Hong Kong-raised Indian became the city's most iconic comedian, all in the mere yet vast 2,754 square kilometers of Hong Kong. And remember that when you wake up, these stories are more than true. The next chapter of a non-local Hong Konger could just be about you. Hi, my name's Kathleen Mcgraw. I am a Filipino born and raised in Hong Kong. I'm currently a third-year student studying politics at Hong Kong U. I grew up with very competitive parents in a way that they really forced me to learn Chinese, whether it's in the playground, at school, or hiring a tutor. They did all that they can to make sure that I spoke the language. But there is they adopted that local mentality that grades are important, and at the same time, family is important. So I would say at home I'm Filipino, at school and at work I'm Chinese. Growing up, they would snicker at the food I brought to school, or they would ask me questions like, oh, so you're Filipino, so is your mom also a maid? How did you get here? I don't know how to place myself when I am, let's say, in a new student society. They ask you, are you local or non-local? I'm like, I'm a bit of both. Or when the professor asks you, so who here is from Hong Kong? I will raise up my hand. Who here is not from Hong Kong? I would still raise up my hand. And in terms of being in a box, not so. People just have a lot of questions about my story, have a lot of questions about what my plans are, and yeah, things like that. People need to understand that although I speak 4 languages, each of them is at a different level. So growing up, I was always told that, oh, you've been to local school all your life, you can totally handle any job you had. And then I did this written task with a company, and I had to read several articles in Chinese and produce an English paper afterwards. That was the first time I actually experienced the language barrier, because verbally communicating, I've done retail jobs that needed Cantonese, it was fine. But to actually pursue things at a more corporate level, at that instance I realized how much more hard work I need to put into learning Cantonese. I can't just stay where I am or stay where I left it at high school. Growing up, going to a very local Chinese school, I wouldn't understand idioms or stories or things that you could only understand if you were Chinese. But at the same time, I adopted their work ethic, and that's very important to survive in Hong Kong. Even though I've been in Hong Kong for 20 years, I still don't know how to celebrate Chinese New Year. And yeah, I'm very Filipino at home. Yeah, I do have the advantage of speaking Cantonese. I do everything I can to get involved with the local community. I try my best to show them that, oh, Filipinos are more than just domestic helpers, are more than just English teachers, are more than just the things they see on Central on Sundays. I guess I'm different because I understand what it means to be a Hong Konger. I feel like I'm a Hong Konger, and I really connect with people, Chinese people, when it comes to work. I understand what their demands are and what they want. Yeah. And one of the local people told me is that in order to change something from the local perspective, you have to speak in Cantonese. So you could develop all these papers, all these articles in English, but if they hear it in Cantonese, or if they hear it from someone who's actually Chinese, then they will change their perspective about it. And I think I could bridge that gap, because I speak the languages, right? And it's just a matter of finding the right information, finding the right problems to talk about from the ethnic minorities sector, and finding the right representatives in the local Chinese community to speak out about these problems. I think you should know that ethnic minority youths are very passionate. They're very curious about things. They like to explore in terms of art, photography, and they really love Hong Kong, like especially people who grew up here.
I would call myself a Hong Konger. I support universal suffrage.
I prefer my secondary school life more than my college life. You can just communicate freely with your secondary school mates. It's like your own groups of people.
I think Hong Kong is a great place to grow up in. I loved growing up here, and it's a great place to find yourself and become independent, but I don't think I'd want to live here for the rest of my life.
They really consider themselves as Hong Konger, and although they don't speak Chinese, they love it as much as you do.